The alarm screamed through the ship as flames burst from the engine room. Daniel Cooper grabbed the wall to keep himself from falling as the Starling shook violently. He was not a pilot, but he knew enough to understand that the ship was dying. Smoke filled the corridor and the lights flickered before going dark. Emergency red lighting came on a moment later, painting everything in the color of blood. Daniel ran toward the escape pods. He had been alone on this survey mission for 3 weeks, mapping plant life on distant moons and collecting samples. It was supposed to be routine work, safe work, the kind of assignment they gave to scientists who preferred quiet study over adventure. But space did not care about preferences. Space did not care about anything at all. He reached the pod bay and slammed his hand against the release panel. The door slid open and he threw himself inside. His fingers moved across the controls as the ship groaned around him. Metal twisted somewhere behind him with a terrible sound. He pressed the launch button and felt the pod shoot away from the Starling just before the ship exploded. The blast wave hit the pod and sent it spinning. Daniel's head struck the wall and darkness took him. When he woke, he was surrounded by green. Thick jungle pressed against the cracked window of the pod. Steam rose from the damaged hull and strange birds called in the distance. Daniel touched his head and his fingers came away red with blood. He was hurt but alive. That was more than he had expected. He pushed open the pod door and stepped out into humid air that felt like a warm, wet blanket against his skin. The planet was not in any database he knew. His navigation computer was destroyed in the crash. His communication equipment was nothing but melted plastic and broken circuits. The emergency beacon flickered weakly before dying completely. Daniel took stock of what he had: a basic medical kit, a damaged translation device, some emergency food packets, a knife, a small tool kit, nothing that would help him get off this world, nothing that would call for rescue. He was stranded on an unknown planet with no way to tell anyone where he was. He spent the first hour treating his wounds and gathering what supplies he could salvage. The jungle around him was dense and alive with sounds he did not recognize. Massive trees rose hundreds of feet into the sky, their trunks wider than houses. Vines hung everywhere like green curtains. Flowers in colors he had never seen bloomed in the shadows. It was beautiful. It was also terrifying. Daniel had studied alien ecosystems his whole career, but always from the safety of a ship or a protected base. Now he was alone in the wild with nothing between him and whatever lived here. He felt eyes on him before he saw anything move. It was that prickling sensation on the back of his neck that humans had carried since their ancestors lived in caves. Something was watching him. Something was hunting him. Daniel turned slowly and saw shadows moving between the trees. They were too coordinated to be animals, too purposeful. He raised his hands to show he held no weapon, though the knife was tucked into his belt. They emerged from the jungle like ghosts, dozens of them. They were humanoid but taller than any human, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. Their ears were long and pointed. Their eyes were large and amber-colored like pools of honey. They were all female, every single one of them, and they carried weapons: spears with stone tips, bows with arrows that looked sharp enough to punch through armor, curved blades made from some dark metal. Daniel kept his hands raised. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. He tried to speak, but his voice came out as a croak. He swallowed and tried again. "I mean no harm," he said slowly. "I crashed here. I am lost." They did not understand him. Of course they did not. Why would an alien species speak English? Daniel cursed himself for the foolish hope. He pointed to the smoking wreck of his pod and then to the sky, trying to mime what had happened. The aliens watched him with expressions he could not read. Some looked curious. Others looked angry. A few looked at him the way a hungry person looks at food, and that scared him more than anything else. One of them stepped forward. She was older than the others, with lines on her blue face and silver streaks in her dark hair. She spoke in a language that sounded like singing mixed with the rustling of leaves. Her tone was commanding. A leader, Daniel guessed. Someone important. He tried to respond with gestures. Peaceful gestures. Friendly gestures. He smiled, though he remembered reading that some species interpreted showing teeth as a threat. He lowered himself to one knee to make himself smaller, less threatening. It did not matter. The leader made a sharp gesture, and two of the warriors moved toward him. Daniel did not resist. Fighting would only make things worse. He let them take his knife and his tools. He let them bind his hands with rope made from some kind of plant fiber. Then something hit him from behind. Pain exploded through his skull and the world tilted sideways. He fell into the dirt and leaves, tasting blood in his mouth. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him again was the circle of amber eyes staring down at him without mercy. Daniel woke in a cage. It was made from thick wooden bars, each one as wide as his arm. The craftsmanship was excellent despite the primitive materials. These people knew what they were doing. They had built cages before. They had held prisoners before. He sat up slowly, his head throbbing with pain. Through the bars he could see a village built into the massive trees. Platforms and bridges connected structures that hung among the branches like wooden nests. Hundreds of the blue-skinned aliens moved around the village, and Daniel realized with growing unease that every single one was female. He saw no men, no boys, not even male children. A crowd had gathered around his cage. They stared at him with emotions he was starting to recognize: fear, curiosity, suspicion, and that hungry look again, that look he did not understand and did not want to understand. One young warrior pushed close to the bars. She was tall and strong, with scars on her arms that spoke of many battles. She stared at Daniel like he was a puzzle she wanted to solve by breaking it into pieces. When she spoke, her voice was hard as stone. Daniel did not know what she said, but he understood the hatred in her eyes. Whatever he had done simply by existing, simply by being here, it had made him an enemy to at least some of these people. He pressed his back against the far side of the cage and waited for whatever would come next. Somewhere in the village, drums began to beat. The crowd around his cage grew larger, and Daniel Cooper, alone on a world without men, began to wonder if he would live to see another sunrise. 3 days passed in the cage. They brought him food twice each day, strange fruits and cooked meat that tasted like nothing he had ever eaten. Water came in clay bowls. The food was good and there was enough of it. They were keeping him healthy for some reason. Daniel was not sure if that was good news or very bad news. He spent his time watching and learning. The village was larger than he had first thought. Thousands of the blue-skinned people lived here among the great trees. They farmed small gardens on platforms. They hunted in the jungle below. They crafted tools and clothing and art. Their civilization was advanced in ways that had nothing to do with technology. And there were no men, not one. Daniel watched carefully for days and never saw a single male of any age. The youngest people he saw were old by any standard. There were no children, no bobbies, no young adults. Everyone in this village was ancient and they were all female. On the 4th day, the leader came to see him. She arrived with a group of guards and advisors, all of them watching Daniel with careful eyes. The leader stood before his cage and studied him for a long moment. Then she spoke. Daniel did not understand the words, but he had salvaged his damaged translation device from his belongings. The aliens had taken his weapons but left him the broken electronics, probably thinking they were useless. He held up the device and pointed to it, then to his ear, then to her. The leader tilted her head with curiosity. She spoke again, slower this time. The device crackled and spit out fragments of meaning. Daniel caught words like stranger and male and danger. It was not much, but it was something. Over the next several hours, they built a bridge of understanding. Daniel spoke simple words and the leader repeated them in her language. The translation device learned and adapted, filling in gaps and making guesses. By evening, they could communicate in broken sentences. The leader's name was. She was the High Mother of the people. She told Daniel the history of her world and it broke his heart. 113 years ago, there had been a thriving civilization. Males and females had lived together in harmony. Children had played in these very trees. The future had seemed bright and endless. Then there came. There were another alien species, one that they had traded with for generations. But they were cold and cruel. They saw other species not as partners but as resources to be used. When they refused to submit to rule, they decided to destroy them. They did not use bombs or armies. They used disease. A plague engineered in laboratories designed to kill only males. Every male, from the oldest grandfather to the youngest baby boy. The plague spread faster than fire. Within 3 months, every male was dead. The females survived, but without males they could not have children. Their species was sentenced to a slow extinction. For over a century, they had watched their numbers shrink. They had buried their mothers and sisters and daughters one by one. Now only 2,000 remained and all of them were old. Told Daniel this story with eyes that had no tears left. She had cried herself empty long ago. Now she simply waited for the end, keeping her people together until the last closed her eyes forever. Daniel understood now why they looked at him the way they did. He was male, the first male they had seen in over a century. He was a reminder of everything they had lost, a ghost from a time before their world ended. "Why did you not kill me?" Daniel asked through the translation device. Smiled sadly. "Some wanted to, many still want to, but we do not murder strangers simply because they exist, and there are some who believe you are something more." Something more. Our ancient texts speak of a prophecy. In our darkest hour, when hope has nearly died, a male will come from beyond the stars. He will not save us through the old ways. He will lead us to a new path. Daniel shook his head. "I'm just a scientist. I study plants and animals. I'm not a hero or a prophet." "Perhaps not," said, "but the texts say nothing about heroes or prophets. They speak only of a male from beyond the stars. You are the first in our recorded history. That makes you special whether you wish it or not." The next day released Daniel from the cage. She gave him a small dwelling on one of the lower platforms with guards posted outside. He was not a prisoner anymore, but he was not free either. He was something in between, a guest who might be a savior or might be an enemy, that had not decided yet. The young warrior with the scars came to see him that night. Her name was Myra, and she made her feelings very clear. "I do not believe in prophecies," she said through the translation device. "I believe in what I can see and touch and kill. That destroyed my mother when I was young. I have hated outsiders ever since. You are an outsider. Give me one reason I should not cut your throat while you sleep." Daniel met her eyes without flinching. "I have no good reason. I cannot prove I am not your enemy. I can only tell you that I am not. I crashed here by accident. I did not choose to come. But I am here now, and I will not waste my time here. If there is anything I can do to help your people, I will do it. Not because of prophecy, because it is right." Myra stared at him for a long moment. Then she turned and left without another word. The following morning summoned Daniel to the great platform at the center of the village. The entire tribe had gathered. Thousands of amber eyes watched him as he walked through the crowd to stand before the High Mother. "The elders have decided," announced in a voice that carried across the gathering. "You will face the trial of truth. It is an ancient ritual that reveals the nature of one's soul. If you pass, you will be accepted among us. If you fail, you will die." Daniel felt cold fear wash through him. What does the trial involve? 3 challenges: the pool of memories, the path of thorns, the question. No outsider has ever survived all 3. The crowd watched Daniel for his reaction. Some hoped he would beg for mercy. Others hoped he would try to run so they could hunt him down. A few, perhaps, hoped he would prove the prophecy true. Daniel took a deep breath and let it out slowly. He thought of his sister, dead for 16 years. He thought of the life he had built since then, dedicated to understanding and protecting life wherever he found it. He thought of these people, dying slowly with no hope and no future. "When do we begin?" he asked. Almost smiled. "Tomorrow at dawn." Dawn came too quickly. Daniel had barely slept. His mind kept racing through everything that could go wrong, every way he might die in this trial he did not understand. When the guards came for him, he was already awake and waiting. They led him through the village to a sacred clearing at the base of the great trees. The entire tribe had gathered in a circle around a space that had been cleared of undergrowth. 3 distinct areas had been prepared: a pool filled with glowing blue water, a path covered with something that sparkled like broken glass, and an empty space before a throne where sat waiting. They were silent as Daniel entered the clearing. Their amber eyes followed his every step. He saw Myra at the front of the crowd, her arms crossed, her face hard as stone. She expected him to fail. She expected him to die. Rose from her throne and raised her hands. The crowd fell even more silent, if that was possible. "The trial of truth cannot be cheated," announced. "It reads the heart directly. It shows what is hidden. It reveals what is real. Daniel Cooper of the human species, are you ready to bare your soul?" Daniel nodded. His mouth was too dry to speak. "Then let us begin with the pool of memories." 2 guards led Daniel to the edge of the glowing pool. The water shimmered with soft blue light, and something moved beneath the surface. Something alive. Daniel felt a deep unease as he looked into those depths. "You must enter the pool completely," explained. "Once you are submerged, the water will reach into your mind. It will find your most painful memory and force you to relive it. We will all see what you see. We will feel what you feel. The pool shows truth. If your pain is real, you will survive. If you have no real pain, if your heart is empty or false, the pool will drown you." Daniel stared at the water for a long moment. Then he removed his boots and stepped into the pool. The water was warm, almost hot, and it tingled against his skin like electricity. He waded deeper until the water reached his chest. Then he took a breath and let himself sink beneath the surface. The world changed. He was 16 years old again, hiding in a storage closet on Colony 7. Outside, he could hear screaming. Raiders had attacked the settlement without warning. His mother had told him to hide and protect his little sister. But his sister, just 8 years old, had grown scared and run out looking for their parents. Daniel heard her scream his name. He heard the raiders find her. He heard everything that came next, every terrible sound, while he stayed hidden in the closet because he was too afraid to move. By the time help arrived, it was too late. His sister was gone. His parents were gone. Daniel survived because he had hidden while his family died. The memory was as fresh and raw as the day it happened. The guilt had never faded. He had spent 16 years trying to make up for that moment of cowardice. He had dedicated his life to helping others, to protecting life, because he could not protect the people he loved most. Daniel burst from the pool gasping for air. Tears streamed down his face. Around him, the crowd was weeping. They had seen everything. They had felt his guilt and his grief and his desperate need to be better than he was on that terrible day. His eyes glistened with tears. "The pool accepts you," she said softly. "Your pain is real. Your heart is not empty." Myra stared at Daniel with an expression he could not read. The hardness in her face had cracked, just slightly. Daniel climbed out of the pool, dripping and shaking. He barely had time to catch his breath before the guards led him to the second challenge. The path of thorns was exactly what it sounded like. A narrow trail covered with razor-sharp crystals that gleamed like diamonds. Each crystal was pointed and jagged. The path was 20 feet long. Daniel would have to walk it barefoot. "The thorns respond to intention," explained. "They cut those who carry malice in their hearts. If you truly mean no harm to our people, you will walk uninjured. If you carry hidden hatred or evil purpose, the thorns will slice you to pieces." Daniel looked at the path. He thought about his intentions. He had crashed here by accident. He had no plans against these people. He genuinely wanted to help them if he could. But was that enough? Did any small darkness in his heart count as malice? He stepped onto the path. The crystals were cold against his bare feet. They were sharp enough to cut through steel. But as Daniel walked, slowly and carefully, they did not break his skin. He focused on his honest desire to help. He thought about his kind eyes and the tragedy of her people. He thought about Myra's anger and how much it must hurt to carry such hate for so long. He reached the end of the path without a single cut. The crowd murmured in shock. Some of them had clearly expected him to fail, to bleed, to die screaming on those crystal thorns. Instead, he stood at the end of the path, whole and unhurt, with clean feet that had not spilled a single drop of blood. "The path accepts you," said, and now there was wonder in her voice. "You carry no malice." The final challenge waited, sat on her throne and gestured for Daniel to approach. He stood before her, still wet from the pool, still shaken from reliving his worst memory. "The question," said, "I will ask you one question. You must answer honestly. The pool has shown us you can feel pain. The path has shown us you mean no harm. Now we must know who you truly are." Daniel nodded and waited. Leaned forward, her amber eyes locked on his. "If you could leave this world right now, knowing we would die without you, would you go?" The question cut deeper than any crystal thorn. Daniel thought carefully before he answered. He thought about his home, his friends, his career. He thought about the life waiting for him among the stars if he ever found a way back. He thought about these people, old and tired and waiting for extinction. "I want to go home," Daniel said slowly. "I miss my world, I miss my life. I would be lying if I said otherwise." The crowd stirred with anger, some reached for weapons. But Daniel continued, "I could not live with myself if I abandoned people who needed help. I failed my sister when I was young. I have spent every day since then trying to be the person who does not run away. If there is anything I can do to help your people, I have to try, not because of prophecy, because leaving people to die when you might be able to save them is wrong. So no, I would not go, not until I have done everything I can." Silence filled the clearing, stared at Daniel for a long moment. Then she rose from her throne and raised her hands. The trial of truth declares Daniel Cooper pure of heart. He is no enemy of the. From this day forward, he walks among us as a friend. The crowd erupted. Some cheered, some wept, some simply stared in disbelief. Daniel stood in the center of it all, exhausted and overwhelmed. Myra pushed through the crowd and stopped in front of him. Her eyes were wet with tears she refused to let fall. "My mother would have liked you," she said quietly. Then she turned and walked away before Daniel could respond. Approached him with a gentle smile. "You have passed the trial, Daniel Cooper, but your true test is only beginning. The prophecy speaks of you leading us to salvation. Do you have any idea how you might do that?" Daniel shook his head. "I am a scientist. I study life. If there is a way to save your people, I will search for it with everything I have." Placed her hand on his shoulder. "Then let us begin." Weeks turned into months as Daniel settled into life among the. They gave him a larger dwelling with space to work. They brought him ancient medical texts and biological samples. They answered his endless questions about their bodies and their history. Slowly, carefully, he began a search for a way to save them. The work was hard. Daniel was trained to study alien life, but he was not a genetic engineer. He did not have advanced laboratory equipment. Everything he learned had to come from observation and careful study with basic tools. Progress was measured in tiny steps forward and occasional frustrating steps back. But there were good moments too. Daniel found that he liked them. They were proud people with rich traditions and beautiful art. Their music was like nothing he had ever heard, haunting melodies that seemed to speak directly to the heart. Their stories told of ancient heroes and great loves and the eternal cycle of life and death among the great trees. He grew especially close to Myra. The warrior who had wanted to kill him became his constant companion. She taught him to hunt in the jungle below, to track animals through the undergrowth, to move silently through the forest like a shadow. In return, he taught her about the stars. He told her about the hundreds of worlds humanity had explored, the countless species they had encountered, the vast and beautiful universe beyond her sky. "I never imagined so much existed out there," Myra said one night as they sat on a high platform watching the stars appear. "We always thought we were alone, that our world was all there was." "The universe is bigger than anyone can imagine," Daniel replied. "And yet somehow in all that vastness I crashed here, on your world, at this moment in your history. Maybe the prophecy is right. Maybe there are forces at work that we do not understand." Myra shook her head. "I still do not believe in prophecy, but I am starting to believe in you." It was the closest thing to affection she had ever shown him. Daniel felt warmth spread through his chest, and he had to look away to hide his smile. The breakthrough came 3 months after his arrival. Daniel was studying ancient medical texts when he found a detailed description of the plague that had killed their males. The disease had been engineered to target a specific genetic sequence, a marker found only in males. That sequence was so unique that no other species would be affected. Daniel realized something that made him sit up straight in his chair. Humans had completely different genetics. Their DNA was structured differently. If he could somehow use human genetic material as a template, he might be able to trigger an adaptation in biology. Not to create males, but to allow females to reproduce on their own. He worked through the night, sketching theories and running calculations with his damaged equipment. By morning, he had a hypothesis. It would require more research and careful testing, but it was possible. For the first time since he arrived, Daniel felt real hope. He brought his findings to. The High Mother listened carefully as he explained, her ancient face showing nothing until he finished. "You believe you can save us," she said, "not by giving us back our males, but by changing what we are." "I believe it might be possible," Daniel said carefully. "It would take time and research. I would need to test my theories carefully, but yes, I think there is a chance." Closed her eyes and was silent for a long moment. When she opened them again, there were tears on her cheeks. "For 113 years we have had no hope. We have simply waited to die, and now you offer us a future. I do not have words for what that means." News of Daniel's discovery spread through the village like fire. Most of them reacted with joy and excitement. After so long in darkness, even a small light seemed like the sun. They celebrated through the night with music and dancing and tears of happiness. But not everyone was pleased. A faction of elders came to see the next day. They were led by a named Cora, ancient even by standards, with white hair and eyes clouded by age. Cora had been a priestess before the plague, keeper of the old ways and guardian of tradition. "This human offers us abomination," Cora declared in a voice that cracked with age and anger. "He wants to twist our nature, to make us something other than what we are. Our extinction is the will of the gods. We were punished for our sins, and we must accept that punishment with dignity." "What sins?" Daniel demanded. "What could your people have possibly done to deserve genocide?" Cora turned her clouded eyes toward him. "That is not for outsiders to question. The gods have their reasons. We do not need to understand. We only need to accept." The debate raged for days. The village split into factions. Those who wanted to embrace Daniel's research and fight for survival. Those who believed their extinction was divine will and must be accepted. And those who simply did not know what to believe anymore. Daniel threw himself into his work, trying to make progress before the conflict tore the village apart. Myra stood guard outside his dwelling, protecting him from those who blamed him for the division. Then one night, someone set fire to his workshop. Daniel woke to smoke and flames. He barely escaped before the structure collapsed. All his equipment was destroyed. His notes were ash. Months of research and progress gone in a single night of violence. He stood in the ashes at dawn, Myra beside him, staring at the ruin of his hopes. "Who did this?" Myra growled, her hand on her blade. "Does it matter?" Daniel said quietly. "The damage is done. I would have to start over from nothing, and without equipment I am not sure I can." Arrived with her guards, her face was pale with shock and grief. "Daniel, I am so sorry. I have failed to protect you. I have failed my own people." Before Daniel could respond, a scout burst into the clearing. She was young, barely more than a child by standards, and her face was white with terror. "High Mother," she gasped. "Ships, strange ships in the sky, they bear the markings of the—" The world seemed to stop. Every within hearing distance froze. The species that had murdered their males, the species that had sentenced them to extinction, they had returned. His voice was steady despite the fear in her eyes. "How many ships?" "3. They are landing in the eastern clearing." Myra drew her blade. Her scars seemed to glow white against her blue skin. "They have come to finish what they started, to wipe us out completely." Daniel looked at the ashes of his workshop, then at the terrified faces around him, then at the sky where death was descending. His research was destroyed. His hope of saving these people through science was gone, but there was still one thing he could do. "Then we fight," he said. "We make them pay for every inch of ground. We show them that they are not prey to be hunted. We show them what it means to face people who have nothing left to lose." Stared at him. "You would fight with us, die with us. This is not your war." Daniel thought about his sister. He thought about the storage closet and the sounds of screaming. He thought about all the years he had spent running from that memory, trying to become someone better. "Yes," he said, "it is." They had no spaceships. They had no advanced weapons. They had nothing but spears and bows and blades and the fierce determination of people who refused to die quietly. Daniel helped them prepare for war with everything he knew. He taught them about explosives made from local plants. He showed them how to create traps using the jungle itself. He helped them set up communication systems using drums and horns so different groups could coordinate their attacks. They were quick learners, and what they lacked in technology they made up for in knowledge of their land. Myra led the warriors. She organized them into strike teams, each one assigned a specific role in the defense. Some would attack directly, others would spring traps, others would draw the enemy into ambushes. Every who could hold a weapon volunteered to fight, even those so old they could barely walk. "We have been waiting to die for over a century," one elder told Daniel as she sharpened her blade. "At least now we get to choose how we go." The night before the expected assault, Daniel sat with Myra on a platform overlooking the jungle. The stars were bright above them, and somewhere among those distant lights was Earth, his home, a place he might never see again. "I need to tell you something," Myra said quietly, "before tomorrow." Daniel turned to look at her. In the starlight, her blue skin seemed to glow, and her amber eyes were soft in a way he had never seen before. "When you first arrived, I wanted to kill you more than I have ever wanted anything. You were a reminder of everything we lost, a male walking among us like the universe was mocking our pain." She paused and looked down at her hands. "But then I saw your memories in the pool. I saw what you lost. I saw the guilt you carry. And I realized that you understand grief as well as any." Myra, let me finish. Meeting you changed something in me. For over a century I have lived with nothing but hate. Hate for outsiders. Hate for a universe that seemed cruel beyond measure. But you showed me that not everyone beyond our sky is an enemy. You stayed when you could have tried to escape. You fought for us when it was not your fight. Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that I am grateful. Even if we die, we will die knowing we were not alone. Daniel reached out and took her hand. Her skin was cool and smooth against his. We are not going to die tomorrow. I refuse to accept that. We are going to hurt the so badly they never come back, and then we are going to find a way to save your people, together. Myra smiled, a rare and beautiful expression on her face. You really believe that, do you not? I have to. Hope is all we have left. They landed at dawn. 3 ships descended from the sky and settled in the eastern clearing, exactly where the scouts had predicted. Daniel watched from a hidden position as the aliens emerged from their vessels. They were with hard shells and multiple limbs and eyes that reflected no light. They moved with mechanical precision, without emotion or hesitation. They carried weapons that hummed with deadly energy. 100 of them formed ranks and began marching toward the village. They expected no resistance. Why would they? They had no technology, no military force, nothing that could threaten an expedition. They had come to exterminate a dying species, to clean up the loose ends of a century-old genocide. They thought it would be easy. They were wrong. The first trap caught them completely off guard. A pit concealed beneath leaves and vines swallowed a dozen soldiers. Sharpened stakes at the bottom ensured they did not climb out. Before the survivors could react, arrows rained down from the trees. Warriors struck from every direction, appearing like ghosts and vanishing back into the jungle before they could return fire. The battle became a nightmare for the invaders. Every step forward brought new traps. Every shadow might hide an enemy. These advanced weapons were useless against opponents they could not see. Their formations broke apart as they tried to chase attackers who melted into the forest like smoke. Daniel fought alongside using a makeshift weapon he had crafted from his crashed pod. It was not elegant, but it was effective. He moved through the chaos, helping the wounded, coordinating strike teams, always pushing forward toward the landing craft. He had a plan, a desperate, probably suicidal plan, but it was all he had. The fighting raged for hours. They took casualties, brave warriors falling to energy weapons, but they gave far more than they received. By midday, half the force was dead or disabled. The survivors retreated toward their ships, their mechanical confidence finally shattered. Daniel saw his chance. He sprinted toward the nearest landing craft, dodging energy blasts, leaping over fallen bodies. Behind him, he heard Myra shout his name. He did not stop. He reached the ship and forced his way inside. Technology was advanced, but a ship was a ship. He found the communication array and began working frantically, trying to send a distress signal on human frequencies. If there was any human vessel within range, they would hear. They would come. The commander found him there. It was a massive creature, larger than the soldiers, with a carapace that gleamed like polished metal. It raised its weapon and spoke in a voice like grinding stones. Human, you were not expected. Your species has no claim to this world. I claimed it when I decided to protect these people, Daniel replied. His hands kept working on the communication array. You will die with them. The commander fired. Daniel dove aside, but not fast enough. The blast caught his shoulder and spun him around with searing pain. He hit the floor hard, his arm useless, blood pooling beneath him. The commander approached, weapon raised for the killing shot. Then Myra was there. She came through the door like a storm, blade flashing. She struck the commander once, twice, 3 times, her attacks so fast Daniel could barely follow them. The commander fell, its shell cracked open, and Myra stood over it with her blade dripping. You are not dying here, she said, pulling Daniel to his feet. We have too much work left to do. The signal had gone out. Daniel could only hope someone was listening. Hours later, as they tended their wounded and celebrated their impossible victory, lights appeared in the sky. Human ships, 3 of them, responding to his distress call. They descended through the clouds like angels of mercy. The remaining surrendered immediately. They had come expecting easy slaughter, not a proper military response. Human soldiers secured the prisoners while medics treated the wounded, including Myra, whose injuries from the final battle were worse than she had admitted. Daniel watched from a medical bed as human and worked side by side. Two species who had never met before today, united by common cause and shared sacrifice. The human captain approached him, a woman with gray hair and kind eyes. "Lieutenant Cooper, I presume. We got your signal. Quite a situation you found here." "These people need our help," Daniel said. "Not just today. They need medical research, resources, protection. Their species is dying, but I believe we can save them." The captain studied him for a long moment. "You crashed here by accident and ended up leading an alien tribe into battle against a superior enemy. That is quite a story. Will you help them?" She smiled. "We will do everything we can." 1 year later, Daniel stood in the same clearing where he had faced the trial of truth, but everything had changed. Human scientists had continued his research. They had found a way to modify biology, allowing them to reproduce through a process that did not require males. It was not the old way, but it was a future. Today, the first child in 113 years would be born. The entire tribe had gathered, was there, frail now but glowing with happiness. Myra stood beside Daniel, her hand wrapped in his. The scars on her arms had been joined by new ones from the battle, but she wore them proudly. A cry pierced the air, the cry of a newborn, the cry of hope. The baby was female, as all would be from now on. She was small and blue and perfect, with tiny pointed ears and huge amber eyes that blinked at the world with wonder. Approached Daniel with tears streaming down her face. "The prophecy was true," she said. "You came from beyond the stars. You did not save us through the old ways. You gave us a new path, a new future." Daniel shook his head. "You saved yourselves, I just helped." "You stayed," Myra said softly. "When you could have run, you stayed. That is what mattered." Around them, the tribe celebrated. For the first time in over a century, they were not waiting to die. They were learning to live again. And Daniel Cooper, the scientist who had crashed on an unknown world and found something worth fighting for, had finally become the person he always wanted to be. Not a man who hid while others suffered, but a man who stood up, stayed, and made a difference. That was enough. That was everything.